What is this? ContraPoints is wrong on point 3. Coverage of Israel's genocide clearly moved the American public opinion. See Gallup polls. ContraPoints is right that building pro-Palestine opinion hasn't changed policy. There's no other route. We need to remove Zionist Dems and elect leftists. Yeah, I mean, socialism done left is like flanking ContraPoints here. Yeah, Brad Lander is another example. When someone who has a disagreement with all that, who doesn't make that the focal point, the central point of their politics, and doesn't stand in opposition of those who have passed their framework and sees them as allies, then I have respect for them. I, on the other hand, have no respect for people who are, at this point especially, still. You can't try to punish people for being correct early and still present yourself in a progressive posture. It is ridiculous, like one of her videos, which is so crazy, like with the paragraph titles and everything. The week after October 7, it was clear the mood among the Israeli leaders and civilians was overwhelmingly kill or be killed. Existential panic and unstoppable lust for revenge. It reminded me of the U.S. after 9/11. There was no reasoning or protesting them out of it, nor was it politically feasible for the U.S. to withdraw aid to Israel on a time frame that would make a difference. That's just objectively incorrect, and it makes me feel like she doesn't know enough about this issue. Because there's only two options here. Either she's cynically misinforming people, or she just genuinely is oblivious to this reality, and I think it's the second, okay? The idea that, well, they're just bloodthirsty, not much we can do about it, is one thing, which is also crazy. Like, just because a foreign entity, a foreign government is experiencing bloodlust doesn't mean that we can't protest that. Is nuts, okay? But beyond that, ContraPoints is who said this. But beyond that, the notion that like it was not politically feasible for the U.S. to withdraw aid to Israel on a time frame that would make a difference is wrong. If that was the case, Biden would not have flown to Israel a week after October 7 and did the now known as the bear hug strategy with Benjamin Netanyahu, and then accelerated $14 billion in weapons transfers to Israel with haste. It's just wrong. It is just wrong information. You are incorrect. Okay? You're just wrong about this. If this is the genuine logical framework, if these are the underlying premises that you are building your opinion off of, you're just wrong. Okay? This is not even I'm not even making a moral statement here. I'm saying you are wrong. 100%. Since October 7, America is responsible for 70% of all munitions that Israel has deployed both on Gaza and all munitions that have been deployed to defend Israel in their defense systems. 70%. The United States of America is the country that keeps Israel as violent as it wants to be. Israel is our attack dog in the region. It is ridiculous. If Israel was not reliant on our endless support, both political cover at the UN and on the international stage, and also, political cover from like sanctions that would broadly be sent to any other country that was doing this level of ethnic cleansing, this much in broad daylight with Western munitions, okay? We give it political cover, we give it protection, but most importantly, we give it directly the weapons that they use on the Palestinians. If that wasn't the case, Israel would not have a multi-billion-dollar propaganda network that steadily focuses on changing Western societal attitudes towards Israel in a positive way all the time. They would not have this sophisticated web of influence in perpetuity since the inception of the state of Israel. It's ridiculous. Okay? Why are they spending all that money then? For fun? Of course not. They're spending it because they also have to. They recognize that the leftist anti-fascist movement quickly decided that their primary goal was not merely the opposition to the Wehrmacht, but it was, or opposition to the Holocaust, but it was actually opposition to Nazism in general. That is, opposition is the Will Stancil tweet from October 8th. The Matt Iglesias tweet and the Will Stancil tweet from like October 8, 2023, saying the left will never survive this. What has taken place on October 7 is so horrifyingly violent that the DSA is over. The left will never survive this. There will never be a coalition that cares about Palestine ever again. And as a matter of fact, anyone who supports this is supporting October 7, and therefore there will never be a left movement in this country ever again. That's what they were saying. That's what they were saying almost 2 years ago. Look at the situation now. The Palestinian emancipatory movement has never had this much support in the United States of America. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. Also wrong. The notion that these people that were more knowledgeable on the issue of Palestine, on who was being oppressed and who was doing the oppression, and the ideological reasons for why Israel was doing this oppression, this exterminationist policy, as a direct consequence of Zionism being an ethno-religious supremacist ideology that revolves around the extermination of the indigenous population, the otherizing and the dehumanization of all Palestinians, Christian, Muslim alike, and all Arabs in general. The monolithization of all Arabs as a parasitic force is identical to the Übermensch mentality of Nazi Germany. It is the same exact type of fascist policy making. It is the same exact type of fascist ideology. So for someone who has written extensively about the alt-right and the Nazis and whatnot, I am shocked at how someone like ContraPoints, who is very well read on this stuff, cannot put two and two together. It makes no sense. Okay? And it didn't shrink the coalition at all. So you're just objectively wrong about that. When you look at the Democratic Party's base of support, I mean, the Harry Enton CNN Holy Toledo video comes to mind. Harry Enton points to Democratic Party support for Israel and Israelis shifting more than 60 points in the direction away from being pro-Israel to being pro-Palestine by 42 points. Used to be pro-Israel by 17 points. And then post-October 7, when this ethnic cleansing campaign accelerated and everyone could see it, it turned into a plus 43-point swing in the direction of Palestinians. So this coalition has grown, and I see it. I've mentioned this over and over again. We talk about this off camera as well with other people who have been talking about Palestinian emancipation for decades, myself included. Like, I have seen this environment, the information environment, and the previous methods of like squashing any sort of criticism of Israel go away. It withered away. I myself am living and breathing proof, a political commentator who is able to speak convincingly on Palestinian emancipation since October 8, 2023, without being utterly destroyed. You have hundreds of thousands of people in European capitals taking to the streets, demanding an end to this bloodshed. This is unheard of. Unheard of. Something that happened quietly over the past 10 years, that the thing you're supposed to say about Israel, Palestine, and progressive circles shifted from a two-state solution message to a binationalism message, which has greatly increased intra-left coalition tension. This is on October 13th, 2023. When the spectrum of opinion ranged from stridently pro-Israel but pays lip service to the two-state solution to fired up about Israeli human rights abuses and the need for a Palestinian state, it's easy for people who don't really care, most people, to fudge it. Once you raise the stakes for what counts as sympathizing with Palestinians to the level of from the river to the sea, you generate a much more polarized debate that can't be fudged. A question that I find generally interesting in politics is, when does it make sense to try to deliberately polarize an issue? It's not never, but it's also not always. And I think the practical upshot of this particular polarization dynamic is going to be bad for Palestinians. Note, for example, that Israel-Palestine is the only issue I can think of on which Joe Biden has positioned himself to the right of Barack Obama. He was wrong, objectively. He was wrong on this. But it's especially crazy to me to be wrong on this 20 months after the fact. Matt Iglesias is always wrong, okay? He's always the first to be wrong. How are you going to be the last to be wrong? I never thought that there was a position worse than Matt Iglesias is on this issue. Yeah, Matt Iglesias is always wrong. Fork found in the kitchen. So it did not actually shrink the coalition, okay? Zionist is a very broad category. Yeah, by design. And there's a lot of lies being told about what Zionism is. Also, by design, this is the reason why Zionism is oftentimes in the media covered as like, do you care as a Jew about the state of Israel? But you know what's never talked about? Because I don't know why interest, okay? Now, having said that, has there been a lot of influence peddling in the process over the course of the past 77, 78 years? Of course there has been. Is there an ideological component to the zealotry demonstrated by a lot of Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists alike? Absolutely. But that's not the driving force of this allegiance. That's not the driving force of this partnership. That's not the reason why, when USS Liberty happens, like the American government's like, oh, don't say anything, That's not the reason why Israel's a special status client state, okay? It is the fact that Israel is a unsinkable aircraft carrier with its own espionage facilities. It is America's very own special attack dog that it can always control in a resource-rich region. Rich both in oil, but also incredibly important for global trade, okay, with the Suez Canal. That's it. That's precisely why Joe Biden said in the 90s, if Israel didn't exist, we'd make one. He was right. He was honest about America's framework on this issue. It was politically infeasible. What is the pathway that takes us from the present situation to the dissolution of Israel as a Jewish state? I don't see how this could happen without either a total internal collapse of Israeli society or else, nuclear war. As usual, leftists have championed a doomed cause. And at this point, it's like it turns into just your own personal, incredibly petty, incredibly self-centered attitude about what you think the online left is doing. It turns into just like looking at an issue that is black and white and saying, well, it's the worst crime that you can ever do, genocide, but the leftists are just like being crazy about it. Like, this is just your stupid gripes with leftist people online and what you perceive as like the broader movement, the broader pro-Palestinian movement. Okay? The internal collapse of Israeli society is going to happen. It is inevitable because it is built on the foundation of ethnic cleansing. Okay? It is propped up. It doesn't have the chattel slavery and the colonial extraction that the American government had, where it could have completed its ethnic cleansing as America did to the indigenous population here, and then continue on with its imperial project. Okay? Israel cannot maintain this without unlimited support from the United States of America. Whereas the United States of America is capable or was capable of reaching a point of independence so it could continue dominating the world, okay? And I believe that this is precisely the reason why, like, people chirp about this stuff to be like, don't talk about the inconsistencies, don't talk about the inequities, don't talk about the apartheid, don't talk about the dissolution of Zionism or the Zionist state, okay? Growing up, I thought being a Jew is the same thing as being a Christian, just another religion to choose from. I thought some white people are Catholic, some white people are Christian, and some are Jewish. I never thought they were an ethnic group until I found out that they probably wouldn't let me in the clubs. I'm not Jewish. What? What club? Anyway, dangerous ambiguities. The vagueness of Zionism as a political Satan enables all kinds of rhetorical abuses. The dangers of Nazism as a political statement enables all kinds of rhetorical abuses. Okay? It's like this is an argument that you're launching here is virtually identical to the Boers and their existence in apartheid South Africa, the white South Africans that wanted to maintain an apartheid. Okay? Like, it's ridiculous. It's like saying this about Nazi Germany. The dangers of developing enmity towards the Germans who support the Nazi regime. What the is this? It enables all kinds of rhetorical abuses. On the one hand, right-wing Israelis hold up all anti-Zionist protests as existentially threatening and inherently anti-Semitic. On the other hand, there is a long history of anti-Semites using the term Zionist in deliberately equivocal ways, Zog, etc. Anti-Semites are happy for the opportunity to misappropriate the now popular anti-Zionist label to legitimize their agenda, and many people are not informed enough about anti-Semitism to recognize when this is happening. These problems are mutually reinforcing. You know what's crazy about this? This isn't wrong, okay? But what's wrong about this is to slam this in a conversation where you're supposed to be making this distinction, but from the perspective of someone who is not a Zionist. Okay? People like myself, we do this every day. There are so many much better read, much better activists out there on this issue that make this distinction every day. The difference is we see Muslims and Palestinians as human beings, and I think if you have this statement, if you can just say, well, these people are being slaughtered, but you don't. You don't see them as human beings. You don't see them as full-blown human beings. Deep down inside, you have to feel like they kind of deserve it, and they should quietly just go away because they're ruining your day by simply existing in the direction of Israeli bombs and not quietly perishing away, but instead speaking out against their demise. Okay? Paragraph 3, dread. The online left has spent the last 20 months distributing hundreds of photos and videos of dead Palestinian children. The main effect of this, and this is the worst part about this, by the way, the main effect of this has been to create a population of people in a constant state of blood-boiling rage with no consequential political outlet. I fear this may be worse than useless. Anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are conceptually not the same, and conflating them is dangerous. But in practice, the way Israel is perceived does seep out into attitudes towards Jews in general. I don't think the Jews who feel isolated and wary of the current atmosphere are simply hysterical or hallucinating. Yes, there's a communal trauma and hypervigilance. Yes, there's disingenuous right-wing ghouls dismissing and censoring all criticism of Israel in the pretext of fighting anti-Semitism. But there's also a valid fear of historical anti-Semitism patterns recurring, and that fear gives power to the right-wing Zionist claim that only Israel can keep Jews safe. Does this mean Israel should not be criticized or sanctioned? Absolutely not. But it's something I don't want to risk contributing to, if not outweighed by tangible benefits, so I approach the issue cautiously. This is the absolute worst possible thing you can say, because it is the most wokeified, most intellectualized version of what Benjamin Netanyahu says when he says, these are telegenically dead children. And you know who's actually distributing the photos of hundreds of dead Palestinian children? Palestinians are. It's not actually the left that's distributing those photos. It's the Palestinians themselves that are speaking out on their own genocide, on their own ethnic cleansing. So to sit there and be like, this is just the woke left being woke by really pushing people to get angry about this documented genocide every single day is a psychotic thing to say. This is the worst thing that she mentions in this entire... It's not only wrong, once again, wrong on the facts. It is not the online left, because the online left is not in Gaza. Palestinians are in Gaza. They are the ones who are showing their own conditions. And to treat this as like a simple nuisance, something that is causing your day to be worse, something that's giving you blood-boiling rage, and then where does that rage go? Against Jews? Like, what kind of statement is this? This is the most politically correct version of saying this is Pallywood that I've ever seen. It is an unimaginably freakish thing to say. Incredibly disappointing. Like, what's the alternative? You see these harrowing images, and you don't look at them and feel some type of way. You don't actually try to get others to also feel angry and resentful towards what Israel is doing, which is genocide, and our contributions to said genocide as Americans. Crazy. A shameful statement. I cannot believe that Natalie typed this out, read it through, made sure there were no grammatical errors, and then thought that this was good to publish. It really reveals, it really, truly reveals how little the people in her immediate orbit give a singular shred of about the lives of Palestinians. Clearly, there was not a single person that could have turned around and said, hey, you know how you said like conflating Israel with Judaism is dangerous? Maybe just hyper-focus on that aspect and talk about the cynical conflation being crafted by both liberal Zionists, and also the Nazis alike. I fear this may be worse than useless. We already talked about this. Yes, there's communal trauma and hypervigilance. Yes, there's disingenuous right-wing ghouls dismissing and censoring all criticism. But it's something I don't want to risk contributing to. It's not outweighed by the tangible benefits. Yeah, I'm not going to I'm not going to contribute to anger and resentment towards the genocidal apartheid state of Israel unless there is an immediate solution. What is this if not cowardice? It also presents the issue as people who are pro-Palestine against Jews, okay? It's the long way to be this smug, it's the long way to take this like vapid, self-centered, incredibly smug attitude while talking about how, you know, every time you're doing, you know, activism or what you think is activism, when you go out to the streets and you protest against Israel, or you say Zionism is fascist, which it literally is, right? Every time you say the truth about Israel, every time you say the truth about Zionism as a political ideology, okay, as an ethno-supremacist, exterminationist political ideology, you're actually harming the Jews. Jews have been around for thousands of years. Zionism has been around for 78. Well, longer than 78, but Israel's been around for 78. Zionism has been around for a little bit longer than 78. The f do you mean? This conflation was deliberate, and it was a relatively new phenomenon. The notion that you would also come out with this statement after 20 months, hundreds of thousands of dead Palestinians. Every single day we see 50 Palestinians being shot at that are starving at a American Israel backed fake charity scheme because they've cut off all aid distribution into the Strip so they can do perfidy and use aid as a military mechanism to further displace and to further kill the Palestinian population, to make it impossible to survive in the Strip, so they can inevitably move them to concentration camps in Rafah and then move them away from the Palestinian lands into the Sinai Peninsula or wherever, probably the UAE. The idea that like this is the idea that this had anything to do with Judaism is psychotic, but to say that 20 months in is extra crazy. It's literally this, but with better language. Hi, someone with heavy food sensory issues here. Frosted mini wheats are one of the only things I can actually consume regularly and not get sick from. Guilting people who can't support boycotts is ableist, but y'all aren't ready for that conversation. It's like, yeah, basically, but it's a far more severe situation because it's about genocide, like centering yourself amidst this like ongoing genocide and your own feelings and your fears, your hysterical fears that you have cultivated, instead of correcting people who have these hysterical fears that they represent, that they demonstrate on a regular basis, and try to convince them, as your job is to convince people when they're wrong, right? If you are a essayist on YouTube, this is your job. Your job is to literally tell people that they might be a little crazy, or in the nicest ways possible, nudge them in the appropriate direction. That's what I do. That's what you're supposed to be doing as well. Aren't you supposed to be de-radicalizing people away from the alt-right, from Nazi-style ideologies? That's what I've been doing. What happened to you? Where did you go? There is no difference here. Bitterness. There have been so many controversies. Some of it like intra-community with respect to like takes that ContraPoints has had throughout her career that I have never really paid too much attention to. You know, I have not. I've thought that she is an overall positive figure that plays a formative role in crafting lengthy, visually appealing arguments that can reach a lot of people and change their minds. Okay? Contra has never de-radicalized an alt-righter. Her messaging has been exclusively for the social media obsessed libs who singularly care about domestic social issues. I don't think that's the case. I think there are probably even people in here who have seen seen trans existence in a totally different light as a consequence of watching her videos. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's correct at all. I think like she has been able to change people's minds on certain issues. She's played a role in this. Okay? Just as I have, just as other people have. I was transphobic as a trans woman and her viz changed my life. I'm really hurt by how bad she is on this topic. ContraPoints radicalized my ex who liked Ben Shapiro. Yeah, no, I think she has played a decent role in this. Much of the online left spent all of 2024 single-mindedly focused on Palestine and the complicity of the Democratic politicians in sending aid to Israel. This campaign had the following effects. 0 Palestinian lives were saved. Not one fewer bomb or bullet was fired by the IDF. It may have slightly contributed to the re-election of Trump, guaranteeing that the U.S. will put no diplomatic pressure on Netanyahu for at least 4 years and making protests against Israel much riskier and less effective. Trump is also, incidentally, a menace to me and basically everyone I care about. A perfectly enlightened being would feel no bitterness about this, but I do. It's just so... I mean, this is so incredibly self-centered. It's crazy. And not because I'm like centering this around what she's saying, which is trans issues and how much worse they're getting under Donald Trump as opposed to Joe Biden, even though I think plenty of trans people would disagree with that as well, saying that a lot of these anti-trans initiatives kickstarted under Joe Biden and Trump has just simply accelerated it, reaching its logical conclusion. But not only that, but especially on the issue of Israel, this is even more pertinent to the discussion. She is completely incorrect on this, not on the trans issue side, but she's completely incorrect on what she is saying about, one, the singular focus of the left. At least here, a lot of people would say that I was singularly focused on Palestine. It was not the case, okay? There were a litany of criticisms that I had about the Kamala campaign and a litany of criticisms I had about the Joe Biden administration, okay? Gaza was certainly an important part of this because it's a genocide, okay? But it is crazy that, like, there is no logic here because you should be mad at the people in power. You should be mad at Kamala Harris and Joe Biden for wanting to continue this genocide, even if it was politically infeasible for them to do so, even if continuing this genocide actually played a role in her losing the election to an incompetent fascist piece of shit. The idea that the genocide protesters, the anti-genocide protesters are wrong and not the Democratic Party that looked at a 75-25 issue in that moment that signified perhaps the most significant problem with the Kamala Harris campaign, which was not cutting ties with the Biden administration, not just on Gaza, but on numerous different policies, because Biden was incredibly unpopular, immensely unpopular. He was old. He was decrepit. He was a beacon of a dying empire, a dying party that had fallen out of favor. And Kamala Harris said, I'm not going to do anything different. She could have been a fresh new face, and she did not do that. The real analysis here is not that the people are wrong for seeing these horrifying images every day and responding in the way that every normal human being with a conscience should respond. Okay? The real anger and resentment should be, how the did the Democrats not care about all of this death and destruction and the understandable resentment that was brewing organically in the base? How did they not even cynically, in a cold and calculated, heartless manner, not take advantage? I can't believe I'm using these terms, but like not even take advantage of the ongoing issue and present yourself as anti-war, anti-genocide. Even if you didn't care about the dead, charred children of Palestine, you could have simply used this as an opportunity to cut your ties with the Biden administration that was a dead weight. It was an anchor around your neck. It was criminal negligence. They did not care, okay? They did not care enough. They were too predisposed with trying to win with their own method, with their own strategy, that they refused to see that this issue had changed forever. Sending Bill Clinton to Dearborn to talk about Judea and Samaria. Sending Richie Torres to Dearborn. I had these conversations with people who are connected to the Biden administration. If you recall, I did the Pod Johns. I did Pod Save America before the election and after the election. If you recall, every single thing that I brought up that the Kamala Harris campaign was doing that was wrong before the election became the major focal point of how they lost the election. Running around with Liz Cheney, refusing to let a Palestinian who was in the Democratic Party and is still in the Democratic Party speak at the DNC. Incredible, incredible failures. Failure after failure. Saying you're going to do the most lethal military. Saying you're going to be more militant at the border than the Trump administration actually is. They're not sincere about their interest in destroying all Latinos that live on U.S. soil. It's not like this was impossible to see. There were plenty of dumbasses, myself included, that saw it from a million miles away. So the real resentment should be directed at the people in power that refused to listen, that refused to abide by the principles of the democratic process where our electeds are supposed to represent our interests. And in a situation where it's 75-25, I mean, what more can you ask for? It was a genocide that started in an election campaign, during an election season, during an election year. Elections are supposed to be a pressure valve for people not to revolt because they feel like they have a say in this process. And the Democratic Party's refusal to hear the cries of its own base of support showed so many Americans that this is not a real democratic process at all, which is the truth. But, you know, people probably cared more about inflation and social issues more than foreign policy. That's not true. That is not true. This was a major, major problem. Okay? That's not how campaigns are run. This is not how elections are run. Of course, people cared about inflation. Okay? Kamala Harris had no good solutions to that either, with the exception of grocery prices. Limiting grocery prices. That was a banger campaign policy that she presented that she packed up very quickly, even though it was her most popular policy. I covered it extensively. Okay? But if you want to look at this, not as simply Gaza, but from a more holistic perspective, Gaza is yet another glaringly obvious representation of Kamala Harris's inability and disinterest in cutting ties with the anchor that was around her neck. The Biden administration. The very fact that she was presented as an alternative in this unceremonious, truly unique, unprecedented way should have been the major reason as to why she has to quickly cut ties with the administration she was a part of and utilize the limited amount of influence and power she has as the vice president at the time to make some changes, to give assurances to the American public that she will be different. It is crazy. The idea that foreign policy is in America especially is separate from domestic policy is stupid, because every single dollar spent on a bomb, spent on a rocket, spent on rockets that Israel deploys on the Palestinian population is a dollar that could go back to you. It could go back to your roads. It's a dollar that could be spent educating your kids. It's a dollar that could be spent building schools, factories, fixing the roads, building better infrastructure. So make no mistake, it is a lie that people say when they say, oh, foreign policy is a separate thing. No, of course it's not a separate thing. They want you to think it's a separate thing. They want you to think that these things are not directly connected to one another. That is by design. Trump is also incidentally a menace to me and everyone I care about. None of this is the fault of Palestinians, of course, who are overwhelmingly the victims here. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Natalie, for saying the Palestinians are overwhelmingly the victims here. I hope that someday American policy will shift in their favor, and I will continue to support that cause. TLDR, I see the situation as bleak, intractable, extremely divisive, and devoid of any element that could be appropriately transformed into political entertainment. That's why I haven't made a video about it. Hopefully it goes without saying that these are just my thoughts. I'm sure other bread tubers, in air quotes, have different opinions. That was her take. And of course, when this unfolded on the timeline, everyone lost their minds, partially because ContraPoints is a trans woman, so obviously anything that a trans person says gets amplified a million times over by transphobes and you know, everyone else, of course. So there is that. But what I don't understand about the entertainment part of this is that, are you doing entertainment when you talk about trans issues? Is this not an existential issue for you? When you make a video trying to convert people, trying to change people's minds about trans existence, is that simply entertainment? I don't think it's entertainment. There is an entertainment component to what I do. I see that. I understand that. But it serves the larger interest that I have in getting people to change their minds. And of course, predictably, Ethan Klein looked at this and went, wow, I couldn't have said this any better myself. This is exactly the war I've been waging. You know, I also think it's a genocide, but everyone should shut the up about it. Yeah, ContraPoints' whole take here is, believe me, in my heart, I oppose this genocide, but actively campaigning against it is unproductive, anti-Semitic, and bad tactics. and also makes me feel bad, and also led to Kamala Harris losing the election. I don't think any reasonable person would tell her you have no right to feel anxiety as a trans woman because the genocide takes precedence. Is putting the genocide as a priority in spite of our specific oppressions. Phil Lawlins, thank you for the 50 gifted subs. Holy shit. What is this? But Trump is literally destroying everything in besties to BB. There won't be anything left. I agree with her. It's amazing how everyone can't understand it is in immediate attack mode. Trump is literal Hitler and we can't get mad, you mean? It's Stasia. I am genuinely shocked at how long you have spent, how much time you have spent in this community, and yet you still cannot get this through your dome, okay? American foreign policy is uniparty. Genocide under Joe Biden started. Prosecutions took place under Joe Biden. Joe Biden's administration literally accelerated the prosecution of people like Mahmoud Khalil, made it an inevitability. Trump came in and seized control over this mechanism of pushback and took it to the next level. The Biden administration set the ground, set the stage for the Trump administration to capitalize on prosecuting unfairly people who were speaking out against this genocide. 3,500 student protesters were arrested under the Biden administration. I got to start just lying to people and being like, 3,500. Did you guys know Donald Trump arrested 3,500 college students for speaking out against Israel? How up is that? So then the liberals go, oh my God, I'm so mad about that, only to then turn around and be like, no, actually, that was Joe Biden that did that. Of course, things are worse under Trump. No one thinks that Trump is not going to be worse than Biden. He is worse than Biden. Everyone knew this. I knew this. I didn't want Donald Trump to win for this reason. That's why I kept criticizing Kamala Harris, because I thought maybe something would stick. Maybe these guys, enough of the staffers that are in here, would be able to like elevate the issue. Did you read what she said or just read a little and get into your feelings? If you read what she said and agree with her, you're objectively wrong. And I can only tell you what the truth is, but you will probably never agree with me because part of the problem that you are exhibiting here is fundamentally unsolvable. You have to solve it on your own, okay? And that is that it is not the left that is showing these images of Palestinians being slaughtered. It is Palestinians that are showing these images, okay? It's also not just the online left that has made this their cause. A lot of Americans from every different walk of life recognize the cruelty here. And if you actually ever stepped outside of your own bubble and went to one of these protests, you would realize that. If you ever actually participated in something, if you ever actually stood for something, you would realize that. How is this any different than when a racist person says, ugh, you calling me out for my racism is the real problem here, not the very fact that I'm doing something racist. It's the same shit. You showing me what my tax dollars are doing to the Palestinians is hurting my feelings, and it's politically unsolvable. I've completely given up. It's nihilistic, and you should give up too. That's what this is. Just let them die. Why do you make this a bother? But yeah, of course, podcaster Ethan Klein voices support for ContraPoints on his Instagram story. It is important to remind people that there is space to be anti-genocide, but also against annihilating Israel. Thank you, ContraPoints. It's important to remind people that there is space to be anti-genocide, pro-Palestine, but also against annihilating Israel. It is my belief that any lasting peace must have two elements, Palestinian self-determination and secure borders for Israel. Without both, peace fails. Many leftists would rather focus on purity tests and social credits than having a meaningful and realistic conversation about creating a lasting peace. The reaction to your post will prove my point, unfortunately. This is the other side of the story. Annihilating Israel. Dog, you're a Nazi, okay? When you say annihilating Israel, what you're talking about is the perspective that no religious supremacist attitudes. Palestinians and Jews can never get along. Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Christians, and Jews can never live in the same place. That is exactly what people said in apartheid South Africa. Black people and white people can't live. Anti-Semitism being a real bigotry does not change this dynamic. This is why people say you are a Zionist. Simply claiming that you're anti-genocide, but then spending every waking moment talking about how, well, sorry, you know, these Muslims and these Christian Palestinians, these Muslim Palestinians, and these Jews, they can't live together because that would annihilate all the Jews. That'd be a Holocaust. That's insane. That's exactly what segregationists in the Jim Crow South said. That's exactly what David Duke says, okay, about black people, about Jews. It's insane. Oh, we just want secure borders. Like how? You're using the same terminology that Trump uses when he's talking about Mexicans invading the country. How does that not read for anyone else? Because there are a lot of liberals out there who are just like completely rudderless and have no capacity to analyze the situation, have no way of understanding that like they are unironically defending the exact same types of bigotry that they despise when Trump does it to their friends and their neighbors. But when it comes down to Israel, when it comes down to like anti-Semitism, I think like that is brick their brain a little bit. So they don't see it in the same exact vein. Oh, it's different? Why is it different? Why can't Muslims, Christians of Palestinian background live alongside Jews in a singular, solitary, secular state? Why does this have to be an ethno-state? I need you guys to understand, this is why I think history is very important to learn so we do not repeat the lessons, okay? Every single historic fascist movement has always packaged its ideology with reason, okay? The Nazis didn't say we have to kill the Jews because we're evil and these guys aren't actually doing anything, but we love killing them because we're evil and we just like want to kill Jews. They didn't say that. They created a logical reason. They created first the Jewish question, the dehumanization of Jews, the claims that Jews are a parasitic force that is both powerful and weak at the same time, the idea that Jews are taking down the German state by engaging in degeneracy in the halls of academia, controlling the money supply, all of this stuff. And then after decades of dehumanization that also even predated Germany itself, of centuries of dehumanization and anti-Semitism, they were able to captivate enough people. They were able to basically take advantage of that pre-existing historic anti-Semitism. That is precisely what you're advancing when you talk about Palestinians in this way. Okay? First, you present an issue with the conclusion of the argument in mind. Okay? You create a fake issue. You say Jews are ruining society. Okay, the economic volatility that you're experiencing is because of the Jews. Then you keep just saying Jews are responsible for everything, okay? All of the wrong, everything that you're experiencing. And then you have to solve this problem, right? But the problem never existed. First, you create the Jewish question. Then you have to have a solution for the Jewish question that you created. And that solution is the Holocaust. And that is precisely what Israel has done to the Palestinians. First, you create a question, Palestinians, the Palestinian question, and then you have to find a solution to the problem of Palestinian existence. In America, there's a different version of this, obviously. Immigrants, non-white immigrants specifically, create hysteria around it, keep hammering the point that they're violent criminals, keep saying that they're animals, keep saying that they're ruining society. As material conditions worsen, there are more and more people that are angry, resentful, frustrated, looking for an alternative, looking for a reason as to why they feel this anger. And one side doesn't actually respond to any of those frustrations, those economic anxieties, the Democrats, of course. And then the other side turns around and says, you're feeling all that anger and resentment, and that's good. It's because immigrants have taken your social safety nets. And then people lean on that. Now you have successfully created an environment where there is an immigrant question or a Jewish question or a Palestinian question. Now you're looking for a solution. But the problem never existed to begin with. It was not a real problem to begin with. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because a lot of people that look to these historic incidents, these historic events, mass cruelty, systematized death and destruction like the Holocaust, and think, oh, well, it's different now. It's not different. The methods are the same. The fake hysteria is the same. The dehumanization is exactly the same. You cannot comprehend because you have been swept away with this propaganda. That's it. In a way, Ethan Klein and anyone else that has this kind of opinion is unironically in the same boat as the average baker in Nazi Germany that was like, I don't know what's going on in there. They put a lot of Jews in there. I don't know what's happening. It smells weird. There's ash everywhere. But I'm just going to keep baking. I don't really like what they're doing to the Jews, but I'm just, at the same time, I am really worried. I am really worried about what the Jews could potentially do to me if they were to live side by side with me. That's it. Just so chat knows, this is literally like saying I'm a liberal Jim Crow supporter. Of course, I abhor lynchings, but what neighborhoods must maintain secure borders and radical civil rights terrorists will call me racist for saying this. Yep, that's it. It's so crazy. That's why liberals absolutely despise Zora, who uses liberal terminology and like the supposed values that liberals claim to care about, claim to defend when discussing this issue. When he says, look, instead of going down this rabbit hole of like, talking about how do states have a right to exist, they don't have a right to exist, blah, 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 that can like muddy the waters. He says, no, Israel has a right to exist. It just has to exist as a equal state with equal rights and representation for all. Obviously, I don't have to engage in this like short, quippy political answer so I can dig deep and explain to you the real reasons why this like dynamic that persists, this question is a cynical one that is framed in a way to make the other side, the correct side, the moral side, look scary to onlookers. What is this? ContraPoints during the Holocaust. Yes, it's a genocide, but sharing photos of dead bodies only leads to the left to bloodthirsty anti-German rage. The left made Nazis their boogeyman when the majority of Germans are Nazis. Do you want a total collapse of German society? Yeah. And the answer is this. The answer is simple to like people that say, oh, you want to annihilate Israel. It's like, no, dude, Israel is annihilating itself because of their desperation to annihilate Palestinian existence. Okay? I always go back to the 2017-2018 Supreme Court protest that Israeli society broadly engaged in. A lot of liberal Zionists were like, how did we get here? How did this country become so right-wing? I don't understand. We're the most moral nation. We're the gay Mecca in the Middle East. Like, what the even though Lebanon is right there, right? It's because the entire society is designed around exterminating Palestinians. And of course, if you don't address that inherent contradiction, then eventually more and more right-wing figures are going to seize control over the state. And it's going to come for you as well. It's going to come for you because you're gay. It's going to come for you because you're doing something that these vicious, rabid, ultra-right politicians, Jewish Nazis, don't want you to do. That's why these polls are also crazy that like people avoid responding to. New poll, Hebrew University shows roughly 82% of Jewish Israelis agree with the genocidal idea that there is no innocence in Gaza. Yes, the primary contradiction of settlement will result in worsening violence. It's a death cult. Exactly. Fascism, and I know Natalie knows this personally, fascism is a suicidal ideology because it requires the consistent extermination of an outgroup at the behest of an increasingly shrinking in-group. That's it. So we're watching historic events that Nazi Germany went through play itself out in a much shorter time span, in real time, in broad daylight, and yet people still are confused by it. It's crazy. And yeah, you got like, liberals trying to intellectualize these statements. Something I'd like to add is that I personally find the focus on labeling it a genocide makes it harder to build stronger coalitions. What coalition are you building with someone that has seen this genocide unfold that still says it's not a genocide? I don't need somebody to consider it a genocide specifically to work together to stop it. I need them to consider it wrongful, unjust, horrifying, and worth fighting against. While I might not be happy if we disagree beyond that, I can live with it if we make meaningful change, something that I value a lot more than internal purity testing. This is not internal purity testing. If you can't even recognize it as a genocide, then why? No one is going to go out. Seemingly, even people apparently that do consider it a genocide still spend most of their time shitting on people who are trying to do something. I posted a similar comment. The label flattens discourse. It allows any means to the ends of ending genocide because it is true. That's the reality. Because it is a genocide and it does allow any means to end said genocide. And that's what scares these people. Okay? That's what it is. Because God forbid you actually have to see the humanity of all of those people that are there, all those people that are trapped in Gaza, fighting back against people that you feel closer to the Israeli occupying force. That's it. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you think these guys are ISIS style. Ironically enough, they don't think Israel is ISIS. They think the Palestinian population is closer to ISIS because, scary Muslim, Arab, right? Like, you don't want to close your eyes for a brief moment and try to, like, center Palestinians in this conversation. Close your eyes for a brief moment and imagine what it would be like to be in the shoes of an orphaned child that has nothing, that has been left with nothing because of this brutal, oppressive apartheid state that sees this child and his family as parasites, that is doing everything in its power to exterminate them, slowly but surely torture them. And then you take up arms to defend your family, what remains of your people. You are not conditioned into seeing the humanity of Palestinians, the humanity of Muslims, the humanity of Arabs, because, God forbid, you recognize them as human beings with their own dreams. Okay? God forbid you recognize them as human beings who, of course, are going to be pushed into a corner only for so long until they try to fight their way out of it. You can't see that. That's why so much of this conversation goes back to the basics. Recognizing Palestinians as human beings and not just faceless bystanders and victims on the side. Hamas is not an alien force. Okay? The Palestinian resistance is not an alien outsider force that unilaterally decides to do certain things and put the lives of Palestinians at risk by angering the great state of Israel. Like, that's a ridiculous assessment to make. They are the orphaned soldiers of Palestine. They are the people whose parents have been slaughtered. Okay? They're not outsiders. They're Palestinians. And there might be disagreements in the methods that they utilize. Okay? Of course. Of course there are. But nobody deserves genocide. Israelis don't deserve genocide. They are the ones doing a genocide. That is how unjustifiable genocide is. That even a genocide in retaliation to genocide is still unconscionable, is still unjust. That's it. It should stop you from saying the truth and calling it a genocide, but I'll gladly take the help of those who won't commit. Senators like Bernie and Van Hollen who promote arms embargo, liberal Zionists like J Street or Lander, they can still be short-term allies and ending the slaughter. I don't care what they think as long as they're doing the right thing. Oh, for sure. For sure. Having said that, however, and I have said this over and over again, what you're describing here, these people are having a conversation with like normal individuals who are never going to be invested in like going to a protest, because the very fact that they are fantasizing about like not being able to build a coalition around the term genocide in and of itself is a clear-cut indication that they've never been to a protest to begin with. Hot take, everybody's in the wrong? No, that's not, this is a stupid take. It's not a hot take. It's just a dumb take. The label doesn't change what's happening. It doesn't change how we should seek the end of conflict diplomacy. The only people who benefit are the extremists whose power grows from radicalization, like the extremists. What is this? ContraPoints is wrong on point 3. Coverage of Israel's genocide clearly moved the American public opinion. See Gallup polls. ContraPoints is right that building pro-Palestine opinion hasn't changed policy. There's no other route. We need to remove Zionist Dems and elect leftists. Yeah, I mean, socialism done left is like flanking ContraPoints here. The coalition that these guys are talking about that they can't build already exists. They're just not a part of it. And that's the reason why they're speaking on it as though it's untenable. Okay? That's my point. If you're having this discussion, that means you have never participated in this. Do you think every single person in this chat agrees with me 100%? Do you think every single person, when I go to the march in DC and I speak at the pro-Palestinian rally, do you think every single person at that rally, the tens of thousands of people that are there, all agree with me 100%? No, of course not. It's not about that. It's never been about that. You would already know that if you actually participated in any kind of meaningful action.